I'll start over. Good evening. Welcome to the council meeting for July 17th. Those of you who are able, please stand, and Mr. Nash will lead us in a prayer.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chambers to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, thoughtfulness in all of our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark all our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen. And Mr. Martin, would you lead us please in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, for the next 30 minutes, we have citizen comment general. This is where you can bring a concern that is not on the agenda. This is a non-agenda item. You can bring a concern about the city that has to do with the city up at this time. I would ask you to please raise your hand. We have a couple of people who signed up, and other than that, I will call on you. Please state your name and your address clearly into the microphone. You have 3 minutes. The other thing is, I would ask that we respect each other's opinions. There are many differing opinions here in the chamber, and everyone deserves to be heard. The council enjoys hearing what people have to say. They use that to inform their decision-making, but it must be done with respect and dignity for everyone. The first person signed up is Marvin Cerruto.
Marvin Cerruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, United States of America. First, I would like to thank each and everyone involved with our fireworks celebration. That was rather important to me, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I hope we can place the same energy and solutions towards lifeguards at Mohegan Park. There, once again, we have a beautiful park, and that would be nice to see that come to fruition. The one issue that I wanted to speak on was a couple of times in the past, ordinances and resolutions language has been changed in the middle of the meeting, and then that gets voted on without any public comment. A lot of us highly value the citizen comment, so I am asking that in the future, should the language change an ordinance or a resolution, that it at least be allowed to be brought up for the public forum and then brought to a vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. John Ofield.
How you doing? My name's John Ofield. I live at 185 Lawler Lane, and currently I'm running for mayor as an independent, and this has nothing to do with being campaigning or anything, but I just want people to be aware of that. That's why I'm here, and when I'm going to say what I got to say. I'm alarmed that a city councilman, an alderman, is considering buying the most contaminated piece of land, probably next to Chernobyl, on the Thames River, the old Cedar scrapyard. This thing is so polluted, everybody from high school kids know how bad that trash is. For example, I physically saw them about 10 years ago tear a transformer that Norwich Public Utilities brought down there, and they tore it open, took the oil from the transformer, and were pouring it on the dirt roads to keep the dust down. That transformer oil is so carcinogenic that I should have turned them into DEP that minute, but I was in the middle of doing something else. That place has been dumped on. It probably glows in the dark. And why do we want to do it? Because we want to put a park there. The city of Norwich wants to put a park there, and it's a great idea. Unfortunately, we got a park up here at Mohegan Park. The city of Norwich can't even get us lifeguards. Because instead of voting on the budget for the lifeguards like we've done in the last 35 years, early in March and February, we put it off because everybody was scared about the budget. So when the park swimming area got opened up, all the kids already got summer jobs, except for one. One poor girl has been waiting for 4, 5, 6 weeks to go to work, hanging around desperately, and she doesn't have any money coming in when she goes back to college because you guys wouldn't pass that budget in February. It's a shame. I was up there 4th of July apologizing to a family from Providence, Rhode Island who came here for a family reunion because there was no swimming area. And like I tried to tell you at the last meeting, and I said it out of line, but I had to say it, there's kids up there swimming now. And when a kid drowns, I hope they hang you. And you have to put signs up, swim at your own risk like the state does, or the city of Norwich will get sued. They're in the pond and they're swimming. Now, you know, we figure we don't have taxes, we need tax money. Instead of worrying about a park on a polluted piece of land that is never going to be used for anything except to be owned by us, we should worry about filling those factories and filling those buildings up in the industrial park and having jobs for people. But unfortunately, there's 2 buildings up there in the industrial park that don't even pay taxes. One is CMAQ, which is a dirty word in this place. I don't know why, because I'm not wrong for saying it. The other one is the Southern Coalition of Southeastern Governments or something. They do not pay taxes. And they take up 2 buildings, 2 facilities, that if we had private companies in there, would be giving us some taxes. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Rebecca Malucci. I live at 303 Mohegan Park Road. And I just want to emphasize what this gentleman said about Mohegan Park. The children are swimming there. I took pictures and I brought them to John Sullivan. I mean, they shouldn't be swimming. They're swimming on the side where the grass is, where, you know, it's easy to get to. Obviously, there's no fence there because they picnic there. But they're going over the fence or finding a way around the fence. And somebody is going to drown. And it's almost a daily occurrence. I have to go, well, I don't have to go through there and go home and get out, but it's shorter than going the other way. So I'm up and down there all the time. And, you know, I see a lot, and I know there's not much I can do about it, but somebody's got to do something because somebody's going to get seriously hurt or drown. And it's sad. It's really sad. And, I mean, there's not much more of the summer to go, so as far as lifeguards, that should have been done a long time ago. And I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
John Blackburn, 15 Alice Street. I'm going to change the tone a little bit around here. There's a couple of events coming up. They're not too well advertised, but the veterans are putting them on. One is through the Veterans, Norwich Area Veterans Council, and the other one is VFW Post 594 and the auxiliary. The first one is Korean War Veterans Ceremony. That's going to be held at the VFW Post 594, 1 o'clock on the 22nd of this month, with July, which is this Saturday. That's the first one. And the second one is August 4th. That's the Tribute to America. It's on the Norwich Town Green, and it starts at 6:30. You are all invited to go. It's open to the public. So that's 2 good things that's going on here in Norwich for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening. David Crabb, 47 Prospect Street. Back to basics is a campaign slogan closer to President Trump's Make America Great Again than Hillary's Stronger Together slogan. It implies the next council would not budget dollars to confront real-world economics and add to the vacant business buildings in the city. Sachem dollars were passed out for an enhanced walking trail without evidence of tourist traffic over the years. A drop in the bucket without evidence, a drop in the bucket compared to U.S. Senate health bill adding dollars that Senator Schumer still claims people will die because it isn't enough. 20 years ago, the Plan of Conservation and Development approved a Mohegan Park Butterfly Pavilion. Some concerned citizens discovered the pavilion received $250,000 in tax dollars, plus lumber sales from that acreage. With NCDC's purchase of the Bulletin property, the visions of art space tenants reviving Franklin Street, along with Waregan's vision yet to provide city revenue, the Mercantile vision for 24/7 downtown foot traffic that complements the IMTC empty promises, leaves the next pipe dream. Incomplete work and bidding on a junkyard that's split with railroad tracks, active railroad tracks. Can the next council return the super budget that the Democratic Council collected $4.4 million that this council stashed in a rainy day undesignated fund? The city needs a council that walks the talk. Lord Acton said it best. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agenda items? Yes, sir.
Good evening. James Cordo, 25 Elmwood Avenue, Norwich. With all respect to the mayoral candidate who was just up here, I have 2 studies on my desk at home as a member of the redevelopment agency. It says it's nowhere near as polluted as he has led us to believe tonight. So I'd be happy to give it to him or anybody else that wants those studies. Continued studies would have to be done, but I'm just telling you what we have. But I'm here to tell you the following. I have this prepared. We're all glad that the budget season is over. Unfortunately, it's a difficult season, and we're going to be facing it again. Norwich needs more foresight and planning, and maybe some budgeting will get easier. Speaking of foresight, we have the good fortune, I think, of having this special opportunity laid out in front of us right now. And I'm speaking, of course, about the salvage yard in the middle of our harbor. This 4-acre property would offer Norwich a great potential to expand its image to a water-based economy, which would attract more people and more businesses. A proper plan to use this great asset will help Norwich for years to come. In remembering a bit of history, in 1803, President Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase. In the 1860s, when the purchase of Alaska was dubbed Seward's Folly, everybody laughed and made it out to be a big waste of money. On a smaller scale, in 2006, our neighbors in Preston purchased the state hospital property. Again, deemed to be unaffordable, and a lot of people laughed at that. Well, I ask you all, where would we be today if all these events had not taken place? They took a lot of courage, and they took a lot of foresight. I would encourage the council members to open active and sincere talks with the present owners. They are Norwich people, and I know they would like the city to buy it. Waterfront property is never cheap, but please don't let this go to auction where possibly another bidder or even another salvage yard could get involved. Think of this as a step in the direction out of our constant budget problems, not as something that we can't afford to do. No one is saying to buy it at any cost, but taking no action on this very visible and very unique property makes one wonder what it will take to make something happen, something positive happen in Norwich. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Citizen comment general is closed, and I thank you all very much for your comments.
Public hearings, number 1, an ordinance amending an ordinance 1749 and appropriating additional funds from the unrestricted fund balance to the City Consolidation District.
I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open. Those speaking in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Those wishing to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
I oppose this ordinance. The purpose...
Please state your name and address.
David Crabb, 47 Prospect Street.
Thank you.
Excuse me. The purpose stated by the city manager is to protect the council's tax cuts. Robbing Peter to pay Paul is a zero-sum game. But grand theft of the $4.4 million super budget by the previous Democratic council amounts to grand theft and a cover-up of a true budget. You can't just use the rainy day fund to make your tax cut come true. It's laughable to call it a tax cut when you're using the rainy day fund to run the city. I oppose this ordinance, as the purpose stated by the city manager is just to save a tax cut. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? There being no further speakers, I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you all.
Number 2, an ordinance amending ordinance 1750, appropriating additional funds from the unrestricted fund balance of the Town Consolidation District.
I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open. Those wishing to speak in favor? Those wishing to speak in favor? Those wishing to speak in favor? Those wishing to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Again, David Crabb, good evening, 47 Prospect Street. I oppose this ordinance on the same grounds as the previous ordinance. The city manager specifies the purpose is to save the tax cut that has been over-advertised a 0.5%. But how are we getting it? Why, we're reading the rainy day fund. How do you find a loophole to raid the rainy day fund to operate the city to justify a tax cut? This ordinance was written just a couple of weeks ago after the budget was resolved. written to save the tax cut. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? There being no further speakers, I declare this public hearing is closed. Thank you very much.
Number 3, an ordinance appropriating $3,200,000 for public safety equipment and authorizing the issuance of $3,200,000 bonds of the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowing for such purpose.
I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open, and we've had people sign up. I will remind you to please state your name and address, as well as limit your comments to 3 minutes. Tim Jenks.
Timothy Jenks, 32 Providence Street. I'm also chief of the Taft Fire Department. I'd like to thank the Public Safety Committee for pushing this bond forward. The apparatus has been long overdue. Over years, society has changed, causing us to adapt. They required us to become involved with several more duties, as well as the demands of the community have changed. The apparatus was purchased a great time ago. It will help us out. But again, I want to thank the council for pushing it forward, the Public Safety Committee and the council for pushing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, we have several people signed up, and this is for those speaking in favor. So if I call your name and you're not speaking in favor, I'll get you next time. Susan Goldman?
I'm just commenting, not in favor or against. Is it? Susan Goldman, 35 Sherwood Lane. I am not speaking for or against the ordinance to bond $3,200,000 for public safety equipment. I do, however, have a few questions and hope that they will be addressed when this ordinance is brought up for a vote. I am certainly not in a position to weigh in on how much fire equipment the City of Norwich needs. I will leave that to those that are well-versed in the equipment needs of the city as a whole, both paid and volunteer fire service. Although it is hard to justify the passing of this ordinance when we have more fire trucks than any other city our size, and the majority of the council spent the last several months redlining budget line items and scheduling layoffs to save money. Also, please take note that I am not editorializing on how we deliver fire service in the City of Norwich. I am only concerned, like those of you on the council, that we are expending funds wisely. I would hope that during your debate of this issue, you will explain the process that is in place and used to determine the fire equipment requirements versus requests for each of the city fire departments. Is there an individual who monitors the inventory for all of the fire equipment that is purchased by the city? Are each of the 6 fire departments determining their needs individually, or is there a person who is responsible for assessing all the requests based on the overall benefit to the city, as opposed to each individual fire station? Is there a 5 or 10-year forecast for equipment purchases in existence that is used to determine a priority list? Excuse me. I hope that these questions are answered prior to your vote, as they will reassure me, and I am sure others, that this ordinance was based on a thoughtful, data-driven analysis of the entire fire service. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Phoenix? Okay, I'll catch you next time. Richard Benoit?
Good evening, Richard Benoit, 136 Hunters Road in Norwich. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I joined Taft Fire Department in 1974, and I don't consider it a career, I consider it a profession. And all firefighters, I think, whether career or volunteer, consider their job a profession. And as a profession, they need the professional tools to work. As a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, a mechanic, a carpenter, a plumber. And without the proper equipment to work with, the job becomes that much more difficult. This equipment was all researched before it was proposed by everyone that is looking for equipment. I know, as I said, I joined the fire department in 1974. And in 1977, I was honored to be on a committee to design and build a rescue truck. We're still using it. I think it's gone past its life. And actually, some of the departments that are asking for equipment will actually decrease the size of our overall fleets. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Keith Milton?
Good evening. Keith Milton, 14 West Ave, Fire Chief of the East Great Plains Volunteer Fire Company. Again, as Chief Jenks said, I'd like to thank the Public Safety Committee for pushing this forward, and you as the members of the City Council as well. These pieces of apparatus are over 30 years old and not up to the current NFPA standards for fire apparatus. When the trucks are out of service, it's getting harder and harder to find parts to replace what's broken. The trucks are required to have yearly testing of them, such as the fire pump. Then that's an NFPA requirement. Again, that's a yearly test. Sometimes for my piece of apparatus, it's just barely passing its acceptance criteria. Other times it's failed, we've got it repaired and then retested, and again, just barely passing. Some of the trucks have open cab seating with lap belts only. The new NFPA standard is to have enclosed cabs with the correct seat belts. Obviously, that's a big safety factor. These trucks have served the city and the residents for over 30 years and still continue to do so, but aren't getting any younger and tougher to repair. If this bond package goes through and passes, the new piece of apparatus will be up to the current NFPA standards for the fire apparatus and will continue to serve the city and the residents of Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Frank Blanchard.
Hello, good evening. Frank Blanchard, Fire Chief, Yannick Fire Company, 151 Yannick Road, Yannick, Connecticut. Public safety bond package before you this evening is very important for all the reasons you heard earlier from the other volunteer chiefs. This bond is a direct result of the hard work of the Public Safety Committee and its chairman, Mr. Nash, over the past 14-plus months. The committee unanimously approved to move this bond request forward to the council level this evening, and hopefully we get the support to continue to go on to the voters. We realize the total dollar amount of this bond request is very large. We would like to share with you the Yannick Fire Engine Company's portion of this bond request. Over the past 9 years, we've requested funding through the normal budget process to replace engine 31 from the Yannick station. This engine is a 1979 Mack fire engine with a 1,500-gallon-a-minute pump and carries 600 gallons of water. It presently holds the third rollout position in our fleet to fires and large-scale incidents. The truck was purchased in 1978 for $37,000. It was refurbished in 1995 for $120,000, costing the city $157,000 total. If you do some quick math over the 40 years of the life of the truck, it costs the city about $4,000 a year. A 40-year cycle in today's fire service for a piece of apparatus is almost unheard of. But past Chief Raymond O'Connell and his officers back in the mid-90s decided to extend the life of that truck to today and saving the city hundreds of thousands of dollars. This engine in the Yannick station recently has, this engine in the Yannick station has been very problematic. It is one unit that spends a lot of time in the fleet maintenance facility. The facility does a great job keeping it on the road, and we throw a lot of challenges at the fleet maintenance facility. I'm a supporter of the work that the fleet maintenance has done on this unit, and the cost in excess of $22,000 has been spent in this truck in the last few years on repair of the truck. The truck is out of service a number of days throughout the year. The mechanical aspect of this fire engine and items like brakes, transmission is only part of the equation. The aspect of this truck being 20% credited by the mechanical side, the other 80% is the fire service side. We have to look at the truck as a whole. Does it work for the fire department? Does it work for the city? Does it carry the equipment we need, and can it do the job that needs to be done? Quick list here. I'll go over with you of the common problems and complaints we receive in this truck that we're requesting to be replaced. Extensive out-of-service time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Aaron. Aaron Westerville.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Westervelt. I live at 16 Laurel Circle Drive in Norwich. I'm also the fire chief from Laurel Hill. I'd like to start out by thanking the Public Safety Committee for pushing this bond forward and the council for taking this as a resolution tonight. I'm definitely in support of the $3.2 million for fire apparatus. I know it's a large sum. Most of the apparatus, as the other chiefs have explained, 30 years old. My truck alone is a 1982 Mack. We've had numerous problems throughout the years. I've sat up here throughout the budget process for many years
and told you guys the problems we've had with pumps, electrical issues, tank leaking. We are currently in a fix that was supposed to be temporary. We don't know when that fix will officially end. At some point it will. I hope it's not before we get a resolution passed and get a new truck, but we don't know when that will be. But again, thank you very much for taking the time to consider this, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Daniel Auger? It is.
No, he meant just sign in.
Oh, sign in to come? Nope, anybody can come. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor? Yes, sir.
Brian Thompson, Public Works Director. I'm not actually speaking in favor or against. I just wanted to clarify two things. Mrs. Goldman had asked if anybody maintains the inventory of the equipment, and that is Public Works Fleet Maintenance. We do that. And then she also asked if we had evaluated a replacement program, and we have. And we have not been keeping up with the replacement program that has been identified. And then finally, I will say also that what these gentlemen have said is correct. The fleet is aging. Whether or not we need the number of pieces or not, that's not my call. But in terms of maintaining it, they are getting old. They are very difficult to maintain. And we do have a program that has not been, we haven't been fielding the equipment over the last few years. So that is just a fact for your information. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else? Oh, yes, sir.
John Blackburn, 15 Alice Street. I'm in favor of getting this new equipment. The only exception I have, that this is new equipment, it's coming out of the general fund, everybody is paying for it. So when these vehicles are stenciled, they should not only have their respective firehouses on there, but also Norwich, because this should happen this way. I don't know how it's been done in the past, but from now on forward, it should be done this way. Every vehicle should have Norwich stencil on them somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Next, we'll have those speaking opposed. There is Robert Phoenix.
Good evening. Robert Phoenix, 302 Old Canterbury Turnpike, Norwich, Connecticut. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. I'm speaking against tonight's ordinance, which proposes asking taxpayers of Norwich to make a choice between updating firefighting equipment or go further into debt over the next 20 years. I'd like to make it clear I am not objecting to the procurement of this equipment, but the methods that are used to make the purchase. The equipment could have remained in the budget as it was originally requested in June, or deferred over time. Or with planning and forethought, this equipment could have been purchased through the budget approval process by this council over the last 2 years or over the last 9 years. The need for this equipment did not become critical overnight. And for that, I have to question the motivation to bring this referendum during an election year. The property tax reduction that was contrived at the 11th hour to meet the campaign promises of last election, and I'm sure will be campaign talking points for the upcoming election, will be fully eclipsed by the tax increase that will need to cover the debt service of this ordinance. I am most strongly object, however, to the buying into this ordinance, to the burying in, of this ordinance with the language that any additional public, quote, any additional public safety equipment, including communications equipment, as later determined and approved by resolution of the council. This language With this language, the ordinance is asking taxpayers to bond what is essentially a reserve account for equipment that may not be bought, or for that matter, may outlive or may not outlive the money that is being borrowed for. No one should ever consider a referendum that includes the phrase "determined later." Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? The public hearing is closed, and the clerk will read the letter from the Commission on the City Plan. Oh, that's why it's...
So it's public safety.
Sorry, public safety.
Public safety special meeting Thursday, July 13th at the Volunteer Fire Department. William Nash, Chairman. The Honorable Mayor and all the persons of the City Council, an ordinance appropriating $3.2 million for the public safety equipment and authorizing the issuance of $3,200,000 bonds for the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowing for such purpose. The Public Safety Committee, at a July 13, 2017 special meeting, reviewed the above reference referral. Seated were Chairman William Nash, Jerry Martin, and H. Tucker Braddock. After careful consideration, the committee voted unanimously to forward a favorable recommendation to the council. Respectfully submitted, William Nash, Chairman. Number one, an ordinance amending ordinance 1749 and appropriating additional funds from the unrestricted fund balance to the City Consolidation District.
Is there a motion and second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Mr. Martin and Mr. Braddock. Those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous. Is there a motion and a second to put the following ordinance on the floor? Mr. Martin and Mr. Nash, is there discussion? Hearing no discussion, this is a reminder that this requires a roll call, 2/3 vote. Okay, guess it's just a roll call, majority vote. Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Braddock?
Yes.
Ms. Philbrick?
Yes.
Mr. Nystrom?
Yes.
Mayor Hinchey, no. Motion passes.
Number two, an ordinance amending ordinance 1750 appropriating additional funds from the unrestricted fund balance of the Town Consolidation District.
Is there a motion and second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Mr. Martin and Mr. Braddock. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. Is there a motion and second to put the following ordinance on the floor? Mr. Martin, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Hearing no discussion, this is a roll call, majority. Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Alderman Martin?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Braddock?
Yes.
Alderwoman Philbrick?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Nystrom?
Yes.
And Mayor Hinchey says no. The motion carries.
Number three, an ordinance appropriating $3.2 million for public safety equipment and authorizing the issuance of $3.2 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowing for such purpose.
Is there a motion and a second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Mr. Nash, Ms. Gould. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Is there a motion and second to bring this forward? Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Nash. Is there discussion? Is there discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I too was appreciative of Mrs. Goldman's questions. I think that there are a lot of questions that remain to be answered. Is this equipment needed and necessary? Absolutely. But why does Norwich operate in a crisis management mode? These are things that should be planned 10, 12 years out. Why don't we have a 5-year capital improvement plan so that we know that in 5 years that Laurel Hill or Yantic or the Career Fire Department is going to need whatever? Something has to change here, ladies and gentlemen, because if it doesn't, we're going to be continuing to do the same thing, and we will be back here year after year after year after year, be it fire trucks, police cruisers, public works departments, or new roofs for schools. I'm going to support this because this is going to go to referendum, and the voters are going to decide. And I think that in the interim that it will behoove not only the council, but the volunteer firehouses to get out there and educate the people about why we find ourselves in this situation today, why your equipment is failing, why we're endangering your lives when you respond to calls because you have seat belts as opposed to harnesses. The only thing that I have a problem with, and Mr. Phoenix, I believe, is that your name, Mr. Phoenix? And any additional public safety equipment. This is not a blank check, ladies and gentlemen, but if we say yes, and the voters say yes to $3.2 million, I guarantee you, whether I'm sitting here or I'm not sitting here, whether I'm sitting over there, that if we appropriate $3.2 million, I bet you that we spend $3.2 million. I don't like open-ended. Any additional public safety equipment, including communication equipment, is later determined. So we're going to say yes to this, and we're going to put it on the referendum, and then a year from now or 2 years from now, the same council or a whole new council is going to come up and they're going to say, well, let's vote for that. Let's vote for that. So, as I said, I'm happy that this is here. I'm happy that it's going to a referendum, but I don't really like the phrase, and any additional public safety equipment. It's too open-ended for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Nash?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to talk about this bond because there's obviously some questions people need to know and have answers to. This is my 4th term. I served 2 years, then I had a 2-year term. I didn't want to serve anymore. And then I let people convince me to come back because they said, oh, I was doing such a great job. So 6 years ago, I was trying to get money for the fire companies because there was trucks that are in their 30s and they weren't getting any younger and they were falling apart. And we have a tremendous, tremendous fleet maintenance department that keep our police vehicles running, the fleet running, and the fire trucks on the road. I've spoke with the supervisor over there numerous times on to what trucks should be replaced and what trucks are next and where, everything else. I've also sat my very first year on the council where we cut the funding to the fire departments because we did have a plan. And the plan was this truck was needed, so we're going to put the money together and get that truck. The other gentlemen I sat with back in those days all felt that we had too many fire trucks. We felt that we didn't need all these fire trucks, and they cut the funding. I was a new council person. I really didn't know that much. I was trying to learn as quickly as I could, and I paid attention to as much as I could, but I followed along. As I got a little more seasoned and a little more mature on the council, I started questioning it. We cut fire air packs, kept cutting it every single year we had money put away. We kept cutting it, we kept cutting it, we kept cutting it. And as far as campaigning goes, that was a democratically controlled council, okay? So we want to start throwing that stuff around. I've never sat up here and gave two craps about Democrat or Republican. I worried about what I was voted in to do. So we cut that money, and we cut the fire truck money, and we kept cutting the fire trucks money, and we kept cutting the fire trucks money, and I had a 2-year term off. When I came back on 4 years ago, I said, we haven't done anything to address the aging fleet. So 4 years ago, I wanted to put this bond forward, and I was talked out of it. No, 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 we'll put money away, we'll put money away, we'll put money away. As my esteemed colleague sitting next to me fought vigorously to put $500,000 away to buy future fire trucks, and it was cut from the budget. He wasn't happy. Nobody was happy about it, but it was cut. $500,000 would get us what? Take a couple more years to save $500,000 a year, hoping that the next council approves it, the next council approves it, and then finally we have enough to buy a fire truck of a 38, 40-year-old truck. I spoke with the fleet maintenance gentleman, and I spoke with the fire chiefs. These trucks aren't willy-nilly. These trucks are what we need to be replaced right now. They fight fires because the firemen that man them do the best job they can with the equipment given to them. They would fight fires with the old pumper truck and a horse if that's what we gave them. And they would go out and do it and risk their lives every day. But we need to give them firefighting equipment. All the trucks that are being replaced are going bye-bye. Nothing's going into reserve. No one's keeping anything. This is new truck coming in, truck going out. In Taffill's case, 2 trucks are coming in, 3 are going out. Because modern firefighting equipment has become so advanced that 2 trucks can do the work of 3. That's what we're faced with. Is this an answer? No. This isn't going to solve any future purchases. But here we are again. You're right. Norwich is in crisis mode. We don't have any money put away for future fire trucks. We did have a plan. The plan was scrapped. Again, I'll say the same thing. I don't know how to fight fires. I don't know what's needed. I was a first sergeant in Army unit, and I knew how to deploy my troops. But I don't know how to deploy fire trucks. I have to take the experts' remarks on those and their planning and what they think the city needs and where it needs it. Okay? So this bond, as Councilwoman Philbrick said, goes to the people. This is your vote now. If this gets passed tonight, this ordinance is yours. If you don't want it, vote no. Vote no, and we'll have to figure something else out to replace a 40-year-old fire truck. Because even if this bond passes in November, there's no new truck for another year. Because it takes a while to build these trucks, to get these trucks up to speed and get them delivered to us. So even though we pass this bond and it goes to referendum and the referendum approves it, it's another year before we get a truck delivered to us. That's a year that they're fighting fires with a 38-year-old truck and hoping that the city garage can keep it running. We still have to address how we're going to buy trucks in the future. We have to address that. And we haven't done it yet. If I'm back next time, I'll work on it. If I'm not back next time, I'll encourage whoever sits here to do the best they can to get the fire trucks back on a schedule where we can replace the trucks that are needed when they're needed and plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Braddock?
Thank you. At the beginning of this budget season, we did have a plan. The city manager appropriated $1.2 million for fire equipment, which was a consensus, as I recall, of the fire chiefs to work out a plan to come up with a better solution to the problem that we have. I'm very thankful for all the volunteers that we have. I'm very thankful for the paid fire companies the paid fire people that we have. I think they do an outstanding job as first responders in our community. And I think that they should have good equipment. I think the way we're doing it is not the right way. We thought we should save taxes. We've cut jobs. We've cut people out of jobs in our city. And we're kicking, as Mr. Nash might say, the can down the road with a bond. I support this initiative to go to the voter. I want the voter to make up their minds how they feel about buying 5 new fire trucks. In the process, there was supposed to be a fire boat. The fire boat we have is very old, just barely floating from what I've heard, but that'll get scrapped. There was one fire company that was not represented. That fire company now is represented. This doesn't have to be such a political issue. It has to be something that's thought out all the time, very systematically, that we're replacing fire trucks as they should be replaced. And I thought with the $1.2 million that was appropriated for it, that was the right way to approach it. But now we're looking at a $3.2 million bond, and I will support it. And I'm very happy that it's going to go to the voter. I'm very excited about seeing their comment. After cutting the taxes and trying to save money in our community, and what have we done? We've come up, I think, in a system that does not work the way that our citizens want it to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alderwoman Gould.
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to say that I'm an active member at the East Great Plains Volunteer Fire Department, and I am proud to be a member there. While John Raymond at Fleet Maintenance and his staff does a stellar job maintaining our fire trucks, our police cars, public works vehicles, the pieces that we are appropriating $3.2 million in this bond for are over 25 years old, and maintaining them is a challenge each and every week. And yes, we haven't had a replacement program that has been funded for years, and that needs to be addressed for the future. But public safety is everyone's concern, and therefore I will support this ordinance moving forward so that the taxpayers here in the city of Norwich have a voice in this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Holmstrom?
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, I will support this ordinance as it's proposed. Previous speakers have alluded to the fact that previous councils, calling that it's every 2 years, there's new people in these seats, are not bound to keep commitments made previously, and I think that's part of the problem. The city of Norwich has a low debt service cost. We don't bond many things. We have used bonding in the past for schools. It's a capital need. Public safety, I think, fits a capital need. For that reason, I will support this. I also support it, and I want to repeat, and I want to thank Tafel Firehouse. They're volunteering to reduce the size of the fleet in their house from 3 trucks to 2. It's a good example for others to follow in the future because it costs a lot to maintain these trucks. But God forbid our men and women in volunteer service and paid do not have the equipment they need at that call. So I support this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Martin?
It's sad that we have to go here and go through this process. Going through the budget process, I did push through that I wanted a set amount every year to budget for the replacement of apparatus. Unfortunately, the people that I work with decided a different path was a better way to go. And now I'm left with this or nothing. Volunteers are one of our greatest assets in the city. They should have the tools to do their job. I mean, they're the people that are going to come pull you out of your house when it's burning. Do you want them to have the tools to do their job? Do they deserve to have the tools to do their job? Does a carpenter deserve to have a saw? Does a mason deserve to have a trowel? The only problem here is that these tools cost a whole lot more. And we can't skimp on public safety. We really can't. I did a lot of research since I sat on the Public Safety Commission, and I found out that the typical replacement life of a piece of fire apparatus in the past was 30 years. Unfortunately, with the state of Connecticut using calcium chloride on their roads, which everybody's probably feeling the pain with their own vehicles, everything's rusting out, and that has been scaled back to 20 years. So by the time we finish paying for these vehicles, they're already past their lifespan. I agree with Alderwoman Philbrick and her sentiments about scheduling and following budgeting processes is the way to do it. An amortization schedule of each piece of equipment with its lifespan should be in place to know that their replacement should be saved for going forward, and that's the price of running a fire service. Right now, we're like Hans Brinker, putting our little fingers and toes in the dike trying to stop it from bleeding out. Previous councils faced tough decisions, and they made decisions to scale back the fire service, and what happened is a small problem became a bigger problem and an even bigger problem.
So we're leaving this up to the voters, and I'm sad that it had to come to this, but there is no plan B here. If we don't replace our apparatus, we're putting everybody who puts on a set of bunker gear in the city at risk. And we have the chance to fix it now. And is it the most amicable solution? No, it's not. Not everybody's going to get what they want, how they want, and everything else. But the city has to sit down and come up with a real plan to address the life expectancy of these pieces of equipment, so that way we're not caught blindsided like we are now. We have to know that there is a fixed cost with equipment and apparatus in this city, and that's the price of doing business, just like anything else. A police cruiser has a certain life, a piece of fire apparatus has a certain life, a roof on a school has a certain life, a boiler in a school has a certain life. Everything has a season. And these pieces of apparatus have served their purpose, and it's time for them to be replaced. And as far as anything else that we need, portion of the bond, I'm not a fan of that as well. But I know that there's a real communication problems where the police can't get all their calls all throughout the city, and that's a problem. And some of this money may go towards addressing those issues, which aren't even listed here before you. The fire service also has problems with communications. You know, and that's going to be a big nut to crack when that thing comes around. But in the meantime, we're doing the best what we can with the cards that we've been dealt, and that's all we can do. So I urge the citizens of our city to support this bond and to give the first responders the tools that they need to do their job so they can go home to their loved ones the same way they left. Thank you.
Mr. Nash?
I'll say, I just wanted to bring up Alderman Martin, Tucker brought up the boat. We are not neglecting the fireboat. The fireboat has another source of revenue that they're exploring, and at this time I'm confident in the chief's professionalism and ability to get that bond pushed forward, and hopefully Homeland and DEEP, whoever the bond was going, grant was going through, will award us this grant. So they were not deliberately excluded from the bond. We wanted to take an opportunity to give that funding stream an opportunity to be addressed, and hopefully we get that boat through the bond, through the grant. If it doesn't, there's other mechanisms in place right now that will help us secure this apparatus that the chief says is desperately needed in the harbor. So we haven't neglected the boat. We haven't walked away from it. We're just going a different avenue with that, hoping that that comes out in a positive for Norwich. They'll still need money to help them secure that boat, but it'd be far less than purchasing it outright. So that's where we're at with that. I didn't want anyone to think that we just neglected to address the boat issue. Thank you.
Mr. Braddock?
Thank you. I'm familiar with the fact that Chief Scan and the paid company is going out for a grant. We discussed that at the public safety meeting. But the word hope is a four-letter word that means nothing. And when you can say at the public safety meeting, I am going to promise that you're going to have an opportunity for another grant at $300,000, you can't make that promise. And that's what this is about. Thank you.
I will not be supporting this bond, this ordinance. I think that after the very difficult budget hearing and sessions that we had, the cuts that were made to the Board of Education, the opposition to allowing the voters to talk about what they wanted with school facilities because questions weren't answered, there was too much not known about it. There is too much not known about this. So through the discussion tonight, there's language in this ordinance that says, well, if we need more, we'll take more. There's apparently, from the discussion, issues about a fire rescue boat. This should not be put put forward. There have been discussion about things in this ordinance that people don't understand and don't agree with. We have not got simple things like lifeguards at Spalding Pond. You know, we had to fight for funding for the, jobs. We laid off people. It's my understanding that there is a plan that could work on making schedules to replace these trucks, as well as coverage between the various departments, for departments that don't have trucks, that are working the way they should. That plan should have gone forward. We have heard in the 4 years that I've been here, we have heard that the police can't communicate with themselves, that many times they're using their own cell phones. And we haven't put forth an ordinance to put out to the voters to purchase a radio system. It's my understanding, because I've asked both the chief and the city manager on multiple occasions, how is that progressing? And it is being studied. Well, if we have gone 30 years with some trucks and they need to be replaced, that should be studied as well, not put out there for $3.2 million, which is money that must be borrowed and paid for by taxpayers. So there are many unanswered questions about this ordinance. There's language that says it's not a set amount or a set amount of trucks, and so for those reasons, I will not be supporting this. With that said, yes, it is a 2/3 vote, a majority, and it's a roll call. So if there's no further discussion, Mr. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Definitely yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Braddock?
Yes?
Alderwoman Philbrick?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Nystrom?
Yes.
And Mayor Hinchey says no. The motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Petitions and communications. Update on the Harbor Management Commission.
Please make sure you use the microphone, okay? Are you going to go over there?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Stedman. I'm a planning consultant, and I've worked for the Harbor Management Commission going back now almost 25 years. And the commission asked if I could speak to you tonight just briefly and give an overview of some of the priorities of the Harbor Management Commission and how the commission got to where it is. And I guess the reason I was asked to do that is because I worked on the original Harbor Management Plan, which was adopted by the council in 1996. The council, and before I start, I'd also like to say how appreciative I am of the opportunity to have worked for the City of Norwich and for the Harbor Management Commission over these many years. When the council in 1988 adopted an ordinance to create the Harbor Management Commission, it did so for the purpose of increasing the city's authority relative to the state and the federal government in matters concerning Norwich Harbor and the city's navigable waterways. That was, I think, one of the main intents of the state legislation that authorized towns to establish harbor management commissions. One of the significant aspects of that legislation is that with an adopted harbor management plan, recommendations of the municipality's harbor management commission that are based on that plan become binding on decisions by the state of Connecticut. I mean, that's the significant aspect of this work, and it's an element of home rule. The plan is also, I guess, a complementary document or a complementary document to the Plan of Conservation and Development. One is the land use plan of the town, and the other is the water use, and the two interact on the waterfront. Last month, the Connecticut Port Authority held its annual meeting in Norwich, and the Commission gave a presentation of the importance of Norwich Harbor to the community and the goals of the Commission moving forward. So the Commission for tonight's meeting made copies of the slides that we presented to the Port Authority for your information, and these will be put on the city website as well. So if you go through the order of these slides, the first one simply shows where Norwich is in southeast Connecticut, but the significance of that location is that it's part of the designated coastal area of the state of Connecticut pursuant to the state's Coastal Management Act, which means that certain regulatory authorities of the DEEP and the Army Corps of Engineers apply to what takes place in the harbor. The second slide simply shows Norwich Harbor and shows the Federal Navigation Channel, which extends from New London upstream 15 or 16 miles to the head of navigation on the Thames River. It's designated by an act of Congress back in the 1800s, I forget the exact date, and has a designated depth of 25 feet. And some of you may remember that one of the first major projects of the Harbor Commission a number of years ago was to get the federal legislation passed that modified the upstream extent of the turning basin so that docks at the American Wharf Marina could be built out. The historic waterfront that we've talked about, again, it goes without saying that Norwich was settled because of its coastal location, and it grew and developed because of the coastal location at the head of the Thames River, where the Yantic and the Shetucket converge. One of the projects that the Harbor Commission did several years ago received a grant from the Long Island Sound Future Funds to make several interpretive panels that you've probably seen down at Brown Park, and one is over at the marina. And one of those panels concerns the history of Norwich, the maritime history. When you think about the areas of opportunity and interest that the Commission has focused on over the time, and we brought these certainly pointed these out to the Port Authority, the American Wharf Marina is certainly one of those key sites. And again, you remember the 1987, the indenture of lease and development agreement with the American Wharf Development Corporation, and that on the old coal depot. And that was the cornerstone of the city's efforts of to pursue economic development tied to the waterfront. Brown Park, of course, is another area of interest because of its proximity to the downtown and the public facilities for boat launching and the docks and special events at the park. And then the Yantic River and Falls is another major opportunity area. Look at this as an opportunity for enhanced tourism. The Harbor Commission several years ago was trying to develop a plan whereby the city could dredge a small boat channel upstream to the falls. That conflicted with NPU's plans to improve and enhance the wastewater treatment plants, so the opportunity for putting dredge material on Hollyhock Island was something that's no longer feasible. We also, another project of the Harbor Commission that you're aware of, I'm sure, is the Norwich Harbor Water Trail, which we developed and provided public materials for, which we did with a grant, again, another grant from the Long Island Sound Future Fund without expense to the city. And then in addition to the Harbor Management Plan, which has detailed policies and goals that the city follows, that the Harbor Commission follows when reviewing applications and pursuing projects, maybe in 2003 or so, the Harbor Commission, NCDC, the Redevelopment Agency, and the Planning and Neighborhood Services Office worked together to develop what they called a waterfront vision that was presented to the council in 2004 and 2011 with an update to it. It was never formally adopted as a statement of public city policy, but it's essentially summarized the main goals, looking forward with regard to the waterfront and the harbor. And there's a couple of slides in the handout that list those goals. The basic goals of the vision. And of course, one was redevelopment of underutilized waterfront properties, and we know where those are. The economic growth linked to the harbor, safety and security on the harbor, coordination among all the different agencies that have some role affecting the harbor, water-based tourism, the highest water quality possible in the Thames River, and making Norwich a center of recreational boating activity on the Thames River, and also a center of recreational fishing on the Thames River. We also identified in that vision several key properties, areas of opportunity. And when we talked with the Port Authority, which is a state agency that was established 2 years ago, initially with the intent of only focusing on the 3 main ports in Connecticut. And the Harbor Commission, along with other harbor commissions in Connecticut, was concerned that if the Port Authority only focused on the 3 ports and the previous Department of Transportation programs that benefited the small harbors those programs were eliminated, there'd be no source of funds for the small harbors. So the Harbor Commission, for a good part of a year, was actively involved with your state delegation to the legislature to make sure that the new Port Authority doesn't overlook the small harbors. And in fact, there's a law that requires, and hopefully it will continue, that each year there's to be $5 million of state-bonded funds allocated specifically for harbor improvements in the small harbors. And I'll mention that in a bit. So when we talked with the Port Authority last month, the Harbor Commission said that there are 5 priorities. Moving forward in 2017 or afterwards. One is to identify a feasible site for a new boat launching facility with more parking, better access to the harbor. The second is to replace the existing public docks around the outer part of Brown Park. The third priority is to develop a new vision for waterfront properties that are now, in 2011, I believe, reclassified by FEMA into the floodway. And you know those properties are the Shipping Street area and the New Wharf area. So the new vision that we have to work on is what do we see as the vision for these properties, given that the floodway designation restricts new development. The fourth priority is to promote the harbor as, again, the regional destination for recreational fishing in southeastern Connecticut and southeastern New England. And the fifth priority is to update the harbor management plan, which would include some of the answers to the questions I mentioned in the first priorities. So we made that presentation to the Port Authority. We were able to get some funds to assist with the updating of the harbor management plan, and we were encouraged to apply in December of this year for funds to redo the docks public docks at Brown Park. And I think that and I don't want to sound, but we've talked about this for so long, that the history of Norwich is tied to the waterfront. That's how the city developed and why it prospered. And now, again, looking forward, we're looking back to the opportunities on the waterfront to support economic development and continued growth or new growth for the city. So that's a quick background of where we are, and members of the commission tonight, Chairman Martin, Mr. Braddock, Mr. Galtieri, and Mr. Benoit. I forgot who was sitting behind me. But I don't know if these 4 commission members might like to add to what I've said, but I'll conclude again by thanking you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you.
Unless there are any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would just like to.
Mike Galtieri, Commission Member, City Treasurer. Thank you, Jeff, for that insight. As you're aware, the Commission has been talking a lot recently about the New Wharf property as it's coming up for foreclosure sale auction in 12 days. It is not our desire to recommend nor not recommend purchasing the property, but we want to make you aware of happenings that we have talked about and have been kicking around. There's obviously pros and cons to that, but as part of that grant, we're going to be updating the plan, and we need direction on where that plan's to go. Couple of pros, the city could facilitate cleanup for resale to the private sector. You could control the property. Obviously, the cons, there's unknowns with the cleanup costs, and there's definitely contamination there. You can see it. So, as you talk about it, if you need any clarification or further discussion with us, we're open to it, and we're looking forward to direction on that plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Report from the Public Safety Committee.
Motion and a second to receive that report, please. Mr. Braddock and Ms. Gould, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
City Manager's report.
Thank you. This is the City Manager's report for July 17th, 2017. The mayor and I continue to have regular meetings. I met with John Wong regarding the usage of the Intermodal Transportation Center for bus service from New York City. He is working on a potential shuttle service for the city, casinos, and their employees, and guests between Connecticut and New York. On Tuesday, July 11th, the Public Works and Dispatch Union's first proposal exchange was conducted with Bridget Marks, Human Resource Director, Pat Austin, Assistant Human Resource Director, and I met with Resident John Oldfield regarding FOI requests and questions he had on the city budget. I attended the City Department Head Coordination meeting at the Norwich Public Utilities Training Room on July 13th. There was a discussion regarding 80 Broadway once the Human Services Department vacates the building. I informed those attending that the city would be working on an RFP to sell the building. My assistant, Jackie Barbarossa, is working with purchasing agent Bill Hathaway to get this completed as soon as possible. I had a meeting with the mayor, Alderman Braddock, and Martin and staff regarding the Shetucket Iron and Metal Scrapyard and the brownfields associated at the site. On Friday, July 14th, I met with Greg Schlau, chairman of the 134th Annual Connecticut Firefighters Association Convention and Parade that will be held on September 15th to the 17th. I also met with a concerned citizen regarding the status of Mohegan Park swimming area. In regards to that issue, the city's merit system rules that employees must be 17 and a half years of age to work for the city. I believe that age should be, that requirements should be lowered for seasonal employees to attain a larger range of candidates for lifeguards for next year. Also, I have the Treasury report attached for quarter ending March 31st for your review. That's the end of my report for this evening.
Any questions for the city manager? Yes, sir.
Mr. Salamone, you're saying that it should be less, that maybe someone is eligible less than 17 and a half? Isn't it based on the courses that they've taken for life?
That's correct.
Okay.
There are many cities and towns that have lower age requirements, as low as 16 years old. That's a junior in high school. With adequate supervision, they can be excellent candidates. I've looked at that, and that could be a solution long-term for some of our problems this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, could you expound a little bit on the ITC and the bus service from New York City?
Mr. Wan is a active member of the community, and he is, how can we say this? He's an informal representative for the Asian community in the city, which has many employees that work at both casinos. He has been made aware that there's a demand for cheap, low-cost, reliable transportation back to New York City for many members of the community, as well as getting to work from Norwich. There are bus services. They don't run round the clock, and shuttles and things, so that's somewhat of an issue. He made a request to me to use the Intermodal Transportation Center as the stop and the collection point for this new service if it becomes to fruition. I said that I would look into it and research the matter because, as we all know, there are certain restrictions with using the building because of private public sector funds, et cetera. So I haven't gotten back to him on that yet, but it does seem to have some merit. So that's kind of where we are on it at this point.
If I may.
Can I follow up on that?
We've been down this road before, no pun intended. And if anyone that goes downtown and sees the current vehicles that are being used to transport these people, I think that perhaps the police department might be interested in them. They're on out-of-state plates. I think this needs a lot of research before we go down.
Well, I wanted to inform the council and the
I
public
appreciate
that we're looking into it. Certainly, interstate travel is much more highly regulated and would have to be on that.
Mr. Braddock?
To Mr. Salamone again.
Yes.
Thank you. When Dejing was first set up, Mr. Sanders from DOT was going to fund that transportation system. Has that happened, or is it just kind of freewheeling and Dejing is in existence and doing what they want to do? I know that they do hang out at the ITC, in front of the ITC, and I've seen them now downtown, and I also understand that they have actually picked patrons up at their homes for a fee. And I don't think that that's a fair method of transportation that we should be allowing in our city. If it's mass transit, fine, but this doesn't
Well,
sound
this
mass
is
transit.
separate from that undertaking. We do not formally allow them to use the ITC. Obviously, if somebody goes out front and they pick somebody up at the curb or something, it's very hard to regulate that.
Okay.
But this would be formal use of the building, so it's different than that. As far as the transportation to the casinos, that still is a problem. There is one bus a day to Foxwoods, and there are several that go between Mohegan Sun and the city. It doesn't address some of the 24-hour type of transportation, so we always look for solutions to that.
Thank you.
Yes?
Thank you, Mayor. John, could you give us another update regarding the Reed and Hughes?
Yes.
And this remaining schedule?
Within the next few weeks, we should hear back from the Propose-E, as a lack of a better word for it, the Women's Institute. They have our draft agreement, and we're waiting to hear back from them on any changes or proposed changes that they would make. And we're looking at consummating this agreement, assuming that both parties agree to it, by the end of July, beginning of August. So it's about another 2 or 3 weeks that they have to respond with any edits they want to do to it. So the ball was in their court at this point.
So it's fair to say that the council in August will be looking at the concept of perhaps selecting them as a developer or not?
Yes, that would be coming back to the city council.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the city manager? No? Okay, thank you all.
Citizen comment on resolutions.
This is the citizen comment on the resolutions that are on the agenda. Again, I would ask you to please state your name and address and to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to comment on the agenda? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Sheila Hayes, 288 Central Avenue. I'm addressing resolution number 2. I'm addressing it through looking at the letter that was written from the comptroller, and I specifically want to go down to the unrestricted fund balance of the general fund, and hopefully I'll get a question. Hopefully I'll get the question now so I can get the question answered. I am a bit confused that in the unrestricted, what he is projecting is in the unrestricted fund balance, there will be an approximate operating surplus of $1.8 million, which would put the city's unrestricted fund balance at 13.5%. The range is 12% to 17%, so it's within the range. But why wouldn't we look at utilizing this money, the 1.5%, as long as it doesn't, the $1.8 million, as long as it doesn't drop us below the 12%, which is the range? Why wouldn't we utilize those dollars to fund the positions that are temporarily put on hold until September, and or look at the educational dollars that were reduced by the $1.5 million. I don't understand why we need to, in this difficult economic period, why do we have to go to a 13.5% unrestricted fund balance if there is money there that could help the city address some of the issues and critical issues that came up during the budget that would allow us not to have to wait to see what the state does, and that we could take control of our own lives with our own budget with these dollars that are projected as a surplus. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the agenda? Anyone else wishing to, yes, sir?
Good evening, David Krebs, 47 Prospect Street. I oppose resolutions 1, 2, and 3. For resolution 1, this is a golden opportunity to cut the ties with the welfare department and hand it back to the state. If you recall, Alcoholics Anonymous has been operating for years, and to my knowledge, it has no input of tax dollars of any form. And they do not solve the issue of alcoholism by plastering it with dollars, such as this proposal. So let's cut the threads, send the welfare department put the welfare department out of competition with the state. Let the state handle these big problems like they are capable of. Now, for Resolution 2, my 2-page handout addresses the exhibit for Resolution 2. The mechanism for the touted budget tax cut is undermined with budget page 33, which reflects the unrestricted fund balance of 12 3/8%. Yet the exhibit speaks about only 8%. The $4.4 million June 16 balance disappeared. Budget page 116 and 117 reveal the impromptu departure of City Manager Berggren and the incoming acting city manager Bilda, and it describes how the city debt service added another budget line of operating transfers that happened to just equal $4.4 million. My handout copied City Manager Berggren's last budget debt service page, And it shows that this brand-new line for debt service did not exist under City Manager Berggren. The other side is a bulletin article about political pressure. The editorial targets big pharma, but it would be the same for bankers, bakers, etc., not to overlook utilities or state and local legislatures. Resolution number 3 is a pure money loser. Studies don't amount to nothing except wasting tax dollars, which the state seems to be in short supply of. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on the agenda items? Yes, sir.
Sorry about it. Brian Thompson, Public Works Director. Regarding Resolution 3, just to clarify what that is, over the last year and a half, we've undertaken a number of initiatives, a road safety audit, collected traffic counts and data all throughout the downtown area, have come up with an overall conceptual plan, which has been briefed and discussed with the Public Works Committee, and have implemented actually the first phase of that with Franklin Street and Willow Street going to two-way traffic. So this is not really a study per se. What this is a grant of $400,000, or actually $500,000, that will take all of this stuff that we have done internally at very low cost and create a working document that we can then go through the process of issuing RFPs for design and implementation and construction of our redesigned downtown traffic redevelopment. Obviously, there's a long ways to go. This is just phase 1 of it. The grant application has already been submitted, and the resolution is really just part of the grant application to indicate that the city is in favor of us trying to get this grant. That's all that is. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the resolutions at hand? Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Thank you all. Public comment is closed.
New business resolution number 1, relative to City Manager Solomon signing the Connecticut Partnership for Success Initiative Grant.
A motion and a second, please. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Braddock. Is there discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
Number 2, relative to transfer of funds from the 2016-2017 contingency budget to various departments to close out the fiscal year.
A motion and a second, please. Alderman Nash, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, ma'am.
This is always a sore subject for me, and I wish that Josh was here.
He is here.
He is here.
Would you like to have him come up?
There he is, hiding in the corner.
He's not hiding.
Would you like Josh Papier to come up?
This is more of a suggestion than, it's called a budget for a reason.
Yes.
And I understand that there are sometimes when people have to exceed their budget. But I believe, talked to you about this before, Josh. I believe there needs to be something in place. In the banking industry, we call them ticklers, so that if you go in and your account, you have $1 million in your account, and halfway through the fiscal year, you've already expended 90% of it. It needs to be some sort of trigger in the finance department, in my opinion, where you or one of your cohorts calls up the department head and says, you've spent 90% of your budget and we're only halfway through. So going forward, any and all expenditures need to be cleared through this office. Because what is the incentive to stay within your budget constraints? I mean, we get the printouts every month from Sandra, and you will see that there are numerous departments that far exceed their line items. To me, it's just if I exceed my checking account balance and do it habitually, Chief Daley will be sending one of his officers to my door because it's illegal to spend money that you don't have. So going forward, I would like to see it at least have a discussion about some sort of mechanism to inform and keep the department heads aware. They should be monitoring it themselves, but I'd like to have that discussion.
Okay. The departments do monitor their budgets, and we do have those triggers. Tony and myself, if we see someone's budget going over, we'll see what we can do to mitigate the overage. This $99,000 represents, sorry, 0.08% of the budget. So it's, you know, I don't want any department to go over at all, but these things happen from time to time. So these individual budgets went over a little bit, but the total expenditures were not over expended for the general fund.
All right, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yes?
May, thank you, Mayor. The resolution before us includes $60,000 for Norwich Fire. Ordinance number 1 earlier tonight included $374,000, again, for overtime replacement costs and stuff like that. Can you tell us, or could you provide for us later on, not tonight, but for each department where they have stood over the last budget cycle, the total amount of over expenditure?
Sure. Yeah. In this Norwich Fire Department's case, so the City Consolidation District was one of the 2 ordinances that you dealt with earlier this evening. So this is just the general fund portion, and their budget overage was about 1/2 of it was caused by retirement payouts, and then the rest of it was overtime and replacement cost. So that's the...
Getting to the retirement payouts, when people, are they required to give notice so much, like 3 months ahead, 5 months ahead? Because I know you in the past have said that some of these costs were not budgeted because they were unexpected. Do you have one of those triggers set up for that kind of occurrence?
Well, I think retirements can be noticed within a matter of weeks.
Okay.
So when that happens...
Makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Anyone else? Yes?
Josh, thanks for being here. You know how I like to look at the printout and then...
Alderwoman Gold is also one of the triggers.
and then I leave it for Mr. Salamone, and then I get a report that's like this long about why some of the departments have gone over their budget, because I start looking at it right away and then call, and Josh has really been very accommodating with me and explaining, but I will reiterate what Alderwoman Philbrick said, that there has to be, and I'm glad to know that there are these little triggers in place to say, hey, you know, you're getting close, it's 2 months into the budget cycle and you're at 50% of your budget, so slow things down. Because it also concerns me that while it's a small amount of money that we move, that we shift around, and I realize it's 1/10 of 1% or 2/10, but every dollar has to count here. So I'll be dropping some stuff off later this week.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Pothier.
Welcome. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
Relative to an application for a grant for a transportation study.
Motion and a second, please. Alderman Nash, Alderman Martin, is there discussion? Yes?
I'm concerned with paragraph 3, including the local match requirement contained. So if this is a $500,000 grant, does that mean that we have to, if this grant is awarded, that we have to come up with $500,000 also?
Would you like me to have Mr. Thompson come up? Thank you.
No, that's not a financial obligation. That's our staff time. That's our contribution. So the city engineer, my time, the project manager, the the documents and everything that we put into it, and the city planner as well. That is our contribution to the grant.
So just so that I'm perfectly clear, there is not a financial matching grant?
It is not a financial matching grant.
Thank you.
Anyone have any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Motion carries.
Number one, an ordinance authorizing $5 million for the City of Norwich Infrastructure Improvement Program 2017, and authorizing the issuance of $5 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowing for such purpose.
Is there a motion and second to send a referral to the Commission on the City Plan, schedule a public hearing on the proposed ordinance for August 7th, 2017 at 7:30 p.m., said ordinance being given its first reading? Alderman Martin, Alderwoman Gould. Those in favor? And that's unanimous. The motion carries. Alderwoman
I
Gould.
hereby move pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 1, Section 200, subsection 6, that the members of the Norwich City Council go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the acquisition or disposition of real estate or interest in real estate when publicly regarding the proposed acquisition or disposition would cause a likelihood of an increased price to acquire and a diminished price to dispose of for the property, and to review feasibility evaluations made for by the City of Norwich regarding such property. City Manager John Salamone, City Planner Deanna Rhodes, Attorney Mark Block, Attorney Paul Garrity, and Corporate Counsel Michael Driscoll shall be asked to participate during all or portions of this executive session at the request of the City Council.
Is there a second?
I have a point. Okay.
Can we bring it to the floor first, please? Is there a second? Alderman Braddock? Did you have a
I have two issues. First of all, executive session is not listed on the agenda.
No?
And second of all, I already knew about this because I read in the paper that the city was going to go into executive session to discuss the purchase of the Shetucket Iron Works. It was in the article in the Day. So I question, as I always do, I'd like an explanation. If it's confidential, the cat's out of the bag if it was already in the Day.
Would you like to address that?
Basically, you have the right to go into executive session anytime you're going to discuss something that is permitted under the Freedom of Information Act. We discuss in executive session. It doesn't have to be on the agenda. It takes a two-thirds vote of the council to go into executive session, though, so it's up to the council whether it wishes to or not.
But with all due respect, if we're going to do things, let's do them the right way. If we're going to have executive session, and we know we're going to have executive session, let's put it on the agenda so that other people in the audience are aware.
Well, the purpose is to go to executive session when you think you need to. That's why it doesn't have to be on. It could be if you plan in advance for executive session, but as a general rule, it's a motion that the council makes at the meeting.
But that hasn't addressed my issue of the breach of confidentiality or the sort of cat out of the bag scenario.
It is or it isn't. It depends what you discuss.
Is there any further discussion? Those in favor? And so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 unanimous.
proposed.
Could I please have a motion and a second to come back into
So moved.
session? So, Mr. Nystrom, Mr. Nash, all those in favor, please note there were no votes taken. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Alderwoman
Second.
Gould and Alderman Braddock, all those in favor of adjournment? Aye.